Hi everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the SharePoint Search Secrets for Power Users and Administrators webinar. I'm Dawn Hodges with Max Technical Training and I'm your moderator today. I want to call your attention to two additional webinars that we have coming up in this series. This will round out our webinar series for this year. Tomorrow we have Managing a Project with Your Team presented by Lou Bergner. And then next Thursday, we have IT Architecture for Non-Architects presented by Michael Fulton. Please feel free to share these webinars with people who might be interested in this subject matter, and feel free to register yourself. Today's Lunch and Learn is brought to you by Max Technical Training, a premier provider of software and business skills education for IT and business professionals, delivering training in top technologies and methodologies for over 17 years. Clients prefer Max because our trainers are highly qualified experts in their subject areas. They help clients solve real-world problems as a part of the typical classroom experience. Instruction at Max is not one size fits all. We develop and deliver modified and customized curriculum that we can deliver privately on the client's site or here in our Mason location. We also provide follow-up mentoring, coaching, and consulting for those clients who need that extra boost to transform the training into action. Tomorrow you'll receive an email from Max with the links to a recording of today's webinar and Mike's slide deck. By the way, you may want to check out the SharePoint user group here at Max. We host it the fourth Thursday of every month. You can learn more about the meetings and register at meetup.com/techlife-Cincinnati. We're just about ready to start. Just a few housekeeping tips. Mike will present for about 45 minutes. He's open to taking questions throughout the presentation, so you can type in questions in the questions section on your GoToWebinar doc. If there are some he can't get to, we'll answer those at the end. For comments or issues you would like to share with us, you can use the chat section. Remember, we're recording today's session, and we will email a link to the recording in the slide deck tomorrow. And now I'm pleased to introduce you to Mike Smith, Senior Technical Instructor for Max Technical Training. Mike is a SharePoint Microsoft MVP, 6 years running, and Senior Technical Instructor with Max Technical Training. Mike is also the author of 2 books, SharePoint 2007 and 2010 Customization for the Site Owner, and SharePoint Security for the Site Owner. Both are available on Amazon. Mike brings real-world application and experience, problem solving to his audience with 30 years of working experience with Microsoft products in various roles, including those of developer, consultant, and instructor. Welcome, Mike. We're glad to have you with us today.
Thank you. Are you going to run the little survey?
I am. So we want to give, we're gonna give you guys a poll. It'll give Mike an idea of what kind of audience is out there today. So if you will just take a couple of seconds, answer the poll, let us know what your role is in SharePoint. We're about 67% folks. Keep voting. Keep it open here for a few more seconds. Okay, we're going to close the poll. Looks like you've got a few site owners out there.
All right, very good. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to try to squeeze about 8 hours worth of stuff here in about 45 minutes, so got a lot to show you. I've got two broad areas that I'd like to look at today. One is an assortment of little tips and tricks about finding things inside of SharePoint. We load all kinds of content into SharePoint, then we end up with complaints from people about not being able to find things. So my goal here is to help you start finding some of the content that's out there, know some of the tricks and features that are available, and a couple of the little weird things that occur every once in a while inside a search. The rest of the presentation will be about things that a search administrator can do to improve the value of search in your organization. Within SharePoint, the search feature is probably one of the most important features that we have, but it's also one of the most neglected. Too often it's installed and forgotten about. There's a lot that can be done to improve the value of search. Many of the things that I'll show you in this section can be done by a formal search administrator, but can also be done to a certain extent by site owners and site collection administrators. In any case, it will let you know what else can be done to improve the use of SharePoint in your organization and to make your users a lot more productive. This session is basically for anybody who wants to find stuff inside of SharePoint. So I've got a list here, but it's basically anyone who needs to find things. End users, site owners, site collection administrators, anyone who has to do auditing inside of SharePoint, and of course the server administrators that run the entire farm. A little background about versions. This presentation is largely focused around Server, Standard Edition, Enterprise Edition, and Office 365. Foundation doesn't support all of the search functionality by design. It's kind of limited, I guess, to encourage you to actually upgrade to Standard and Enterprise. Office 365, the full set of features depends on your subscription, but in 365, almost everything that I describe in this session applies there. We'll also look briefly at this thing called Delve, which is a unique feature within 365, and mostly mention Yammer here to say that SharePoint Search and Yammer are not integrated yet. So you will need to search inside of SharePoint, and if your team is using Yammer, repeat your search inside of Yammer to try to find all of the discussions and all of the content. Basic backgrounder on search. Content has to be crawled. Crawling occurs on a schedule. Because of that, a lot of users will upload files and say, it's out there, you all can now find it, and other users will go out and look for it, and they can't find it. At some point in time, it then goes out and performs the actual crawl. Now, depending on your environment, this might be within 5 minutes, this might be within an hour. I've seen some organizations that only do search crawls in the evening, so it might be the next day before something shows up inside a search. So after it's been crawled, then people can go out and find it. Search is often described as a cache of content. So anytime we talk about the word caching, we're talking about improving performance. We're storing data for very fast retrieval. The only problem with cached content is that it's not usually up to date. So I'll mention later on the use of the search web parts. I could display a list of announcements or a list of tasks, and that's always current and up to date. But it has to be read out of the databases, out of the content behind SharePoint. If I use a search web part, that data can be retrieved a lot faster and a lot more efficiently. The only problem is it might not be completely up to date. As an example, I see that I have a task that's past due. Oh, it's actually done. So I go out to the task list, I update it, I come back to our home page, and the search-driven web part still shows it as being past due until the next actual search crawl occurs. So be aware that when you add content to SharePoint, there is a delay before it actually becomes visible inside of SharePoint. That actual schedule is dependent on your installation and your administrators. So it might be a very interesting question to ask your site collection administrators, server administrators, is how often the content is actually crawled. Crawl sources. Where does the data actually come from? And one of the interesting things about SharePoint Search is that it can crawl things outside of SharePoint. Now, the obvious things that it crawls are SharePoint sites, lists, libraries, all of the basic content inside of SharePoint. But it can also go out and crawl SQL databases. So you might have a database out there with a list of all of your products that can be made visible inside of SharePoint through search. You can also index all of your network shares. so that you don't have to move all of your content into SharePoint to be able to find it within SharePoint. And it indexes things about people, starting with your user profiles. But it also knows about what you're doing inside of SharePoint. So once things have been crawled, it's then available to search. As part of that crawling process, it's going to decide what it's going to include in the search indexes. And the short answer is everything. But there are some exceptions, but the basic list basically is everything inside of SharePoint, as mentioned before. All of the list and library metadata. So if you've added columns to describe your documents, all of that information is available to search. So I can search for a word in the title of the document, a word in the metadata of the document, or a word inside of many of the documents. All of the metadata. Now this is kind of a sneaky one here because the metadata includes not only the columns inside of SharePoint, but all the things inside of Word and Excel and PowerPoint. So if I go to this little Word document I've got here, I can see some basic properties about it. But if I click the Advanced Properties button inside of Word, I can see that all of this data is also indexed. You probably are good Word users, right? You always fill this out before you save a document, especially before you upload it to SharePoint. If you have borrowed a template from somebody else and just used it and you didn't change this, SharePoint will consider whoever's listed here as being one of the authors of that document. This could be somebody who hasn't worked for the company for years. This is a person who actually created the Word template that you're using, or the PowerPoint template, or whatever it might be. So we index all kinds of metadata, including what's visible inside of SharePoint and including what's embedded inside of these documents. As another example of that, if I upload a photograph, the photograph may have inside of it information about the camera, the date that it was taken, and in some cases the location where it was taken. If that data is available inside of the photograph and SharePoint is aware of it, it will include it in the index, and we can then use that for search purposes. The actual content of recognized documents is also indexed. Notice I stressed recognized there. These include things that Microsoft likes, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all the other common files like text, PDF, HTML files, and things of that sort. What's not included is the content of the unrecognized files. Those include things like WordPerfect, AutoCAD, and other file types that you might upload. In our classes, or you can go to the online documentation, we document all of the file types that are actually indexed by default and a short list of those that are known to be excluded. It also indexes user profiles to discover things about people, and as mentioned before, external content from all kinds of sources. Your accounting systems, your CRM systems, tables inside a SQL Server. What's not indexed? This is the gotcha list. Anything but the most recent version of an item. So if I have a keyword in an old version of a document, I'll never be able to find it in search. It's only indexing the most recent version of that document that has been published and checked in. So unpublished versions are not indexed. Checked out documents are not indexed. And that actually makes good business sense. I don't want anybody finding a document that's currently a work in progress. But if I forgot to check it in, and if we're using the publishing versions, major and minor versions, and I forgot to publish it, people won't be able to find it. The contents of files with file types not listed in the file types list, and that includes things like AutoCAD and WordPerfect and things of that sort. They're not in that list. They're excluded by design. Very large files are only partially indexed. So I have a very large Word document, and the first 50 pages of it are nothing but pictures and charts. That could be a problem because notice it only opens the first 64 megabyte of a file, and in the case of Excel, the first 3 megabyte. That's all it even opens. The rest of the file is ignored. That's for performance purposes. We have a lot of content to crawl. It takes a long time to do it, so they put in some restrictions. Anything beyond the first 2 million characters, 2 megabyte of the extracted text. Now that means ignoring the pictures and the charts and all of the artwork, only extract the text. So the first 2 million characters or what can be processed in 30 seconds. So this is also a possible restriction or limitation. I know there's a word in the footnotes of this document and I can't find the document based on searching for that word. And it's because it's past that limit. Content in lists, libraries, and sites where the site owner has disabled the allow to appear in search results. So as a site owner, you can go into your site settings, and in the site settings, you can go out and in the in the site settings search options, you can basically hide your site from search. That's very useful for an archive site, a testing site, a sandbox site, things that sites that contain obsolete content, sites that you didn't necessarily want to lock down with security. You want users to be able to go there and browse, but you didn't want them to actually to accidentally find those files when they were looking for the current versions. Same thing applies to individual lists and libraries. You can go to list settings, and in the advanced section, you can also hide this list from search. But always remember, everything in search is always trimmed by security. If you don't have rights to see it, you're not going to actually find that content. One user can do a search and find 100 results. The next user can do a search and find 12 results. The difference usually is around security, around their permissions. An important note is that if you have discovered that one of your sites is not properly locked down and you go out and modify your security and then ask somebody to test it by doing a search, they still may find your documents until the next crawl occurs. Remember, search contains cached content. So it might be 5 minutes, it might be 24 hours before search is updated to hide that content. Now, after you've locked down that content, a user might find it for a while in search. If they click on it, they will get access denied. But be aware that they're just being able to see the file name or to see the little abstract that is created by search might tell them more than they need to know. Alternates to search. Delve is a tool that's available in Office 365. It's not currently available on premises. It will be available in some form with SharePoint 2016. Let me bring up an example of Delve here. And this is Delve. And let me just go to the home page of Delve. I have no friends, no activity. Delve hasn't run long enough to even discover what I'm interested in yet. Delve is a tool that goes out at what I do, what my coworkers do, what might be of interest, and try to guess what I want to see. So it knows that I've often done searches on certain keywords like SQL Server and SharePoint. It knows that I've worked with a team on PowerPoint projects, and therefore it starts to find documents inside of SharePoint that I might be interested in. Now, Delve is supposed to be artificial intelligence. Sometimes they describe it that way, sometimes they describe it other ways, but it uses machine learning. It watches what you do. It watches what your team members do. It watches what the people that you follow do. And based on that, guesses what might be of interest to you. In other words, instead of going out every day and searching for all of your favorite keywords, Delve is going to try to do that for you and bring that to the top. Now, the problem with Delve is that it's going to expose weaknesses in your own setup for security. So there may be documents out here that should not be visible to everybody in the organization. They've never searched for contract to find contracts, but now this contract's going to be recommended to them as a result. So if you're using Office 365, you may find that Delve starts driving good governance around security because people are saying, I didn't know there was an IT reorganization plan, and it popped up in my Delve because nobody ever secured it in a site. So Delve is a very interesting tool, artificial intelligence. It has a search box, but it is not the search box that you know elsewhere. As an example, in a normal search site, I went out and did a search by purchase order number and found these two documents. If I do this same search in Delve, Delve won't understand because it doesn't understand the metadata. It doesn't understand the PO number. Now, if I get rid of that, hey, it found the purchase order. But Delve is only guessing about what I'm interested in about that thing. it missed the fact that there's also a contract out there about that same purchase order number. So Delve is a discovery tool. It's not a true search tool. It is changing all the time, so who knows what it will eventually evolve into. But just be aware that it may start exposing things to users that they shouldn't see, but that's only because you never properly secured them. Here's all the places that you can do a search. You can search in the top right-hand corner of most pages, and by default, that's going to search the current site only. You can go into a library, and at the top there's a little search box up here. That little search box will search the current library only. There's a OneDrive box inside of your OneDrive, your personal site collection, and the only thing that's really special about it is that it does a search as you type. So you type the first couple letters in, it's already starting to show results. And as you type more characters, it better filters those results. In a lot of ways, I kind of like that box better than the regular search boxes that they provide for us elsewhere. It does add a little more overhead on the server because it's constantly, as you type each letter, repeating the search as you type. And then you will probably have a search center. Your administrators will set these up for you. A search center will let you go out and basically search everything inside of SharePoint. And your administrators might design custom search pages for you. So how do you start your search? Where do you go first? If you don't know where the content is in the organization, I want to find the employee manual, but where is it? You would probably go to the Enterprise Search Center and start there. If you know that the employee manual is inside of the Human Resources site, you'll get better results by going there and starting your search at the top of the page there. It will search in that site, its lists and libraries, and all the subsites below it. So you start out a lot more focused at that point instead of doing a Google search and searching for everything. If you know which library it's in, go directly to that library and type in the search box above it. And if it exists outside of SharePoint, go to your search center. That's the place, or the only place really, that you'll probably discover that external content. Here's what a typical user does. It's not necessarily best practice, but it's just kind of a flow that they will probably do. Because they're looking at a site, they'll type some keywords into the search box on that page, top right-hand corner. They will go to a local search results page. Biggest problem with this general search results page is that it's not customizable by your search administrators. That will limit them to, by default, the search inside of their current site. It's got some drop downs to go elsewhere, but it will focus on the current site. They'll probably not find what they're looking for, and in the drop down in there, there's an option called Everything. So they'll then select Everything. SharePoint then sends them to the Search Center. Be aware that that sends them to another site collection. It sends them away from the current site that they were in. If they can't find what they're searching for there, or they're getting back 500,000 results and they can't page through all of that, there's a link called Advanced Search that they might click. Advanced Search should be called Easy Search instead of Advanced because it gives you a form to fill out and then it writes a search query for you. Having done that, it redirects you back to the Enterprise Search Center and searches everything. So that is actually a very useful feature. I encourage the administrators to bring a link to that up to the top so it's a lot easier to find. Right now, your users will only find it after they have done a search. Let's see, I think it's enabled in my search here. So right down at the bottom, you'll see a link down here to Advanced Search. When I click it, I get a nice little form to fill out that, when I'm finished, actually goes and writes the search for me. So I can search for a pattern of words, I can search for it in a certain language, I can search based on certain properties, even though I don't know how to use the property names properly, this will write it for me. And then when I click search, it will actually go out and write that for me. So I want to search for the word SharePoint, I want to exclude the word security, and I want only documents that are in English, and I want the author to be Smith, contains Smith, and possibly other properties. Then click search, and notice up here it wrote a complicated query for me. and I just discovered a cool new feature. Hey, there's a property called detected language. I can actually go out and search by language. I didn't know that. So by playing with advanced search, you may learn some new little tricks about using search. But now it's written a search for me that's more focused, and a lot of your users don't know how to do this. So encourage the use of this advanced search button. For that matter, you might want to just copy that link and add it to your quick launch, add it to your home page of your site, something of that sort to send them directly to that page. Okay. Basic searching, what does the average user do? Same thing we do in Bing and Google. We go out and do a Google search. We type in a word or words, we press enter, we get back millions of results, we click next once or maybe twice, and then we give up. So we missed the target, way off, we got too much data back. We might add additional keywords, and that will help some, but we're still getting lots of results back. We might start using quotes or other tools to start refining our search. So now we're finding things with just that exact phrase. So that gives us a start in search, but the problem with this is users get frustrated at this point because they're just getting way too much data back. So we need to start refining our searches, and we might go out and type something like title. Title is a property, formerly called a managed property. That managed property lets us target in on certain pieces of metadata about items. This looks for any document with the name of jet. No other words, the exact name. So equals is not going to be used too often. Teach your users to type a colon. This means contained in. Now find every document that contains the word jet. By the way, this will not find a title that contains the word the Jetsons, because jet and Jetsons are two different words. If I use the contained in, the colon, I can also use an asterisk. That asterisk will broaden the search and let me find anything that starts with those three letters. Okay, so equals, contains, and the ability to use wildcards. Wouldn't it be nice if we could type in our metadata? So I'm in training. I want to be able to find every document about a certain course. I'd like to be able to type in the word course, equals, and the exact course title or part number or name. Part numbers, purchase order numbers, I'd like to be able to target these. These are not available in general SharePoint without the additional work of an administrator. That could be a site owner for just their site, a site collection administrator for the whole site collection, or ideally, a SharePoint search administrator for the organization that would do this for the entire organization. So I'll show you a little bit more about this, but keep in mind that out of the box, we have a list of their metadata to choose from, not ours. So the only thing that we could do is type in the part number and hope for the best. Now you've already seen quotes, and this is an introduction here to the Boolean logic. You can use keywords like and or. Notice the note down here, they only work if they're typed in uppercase. If you type them in lowercase, they're considered to be noise words and they're ignored. Okay, you can also exclude things because I want to find all the Smith documents out there, but not this guy called Mike Smith. I'd like to exclude him. You can also add plus signs, but they're redundant inside of SharePoint. Plus means both of these words are required. That's an assumption inside of SharePoint. But if you're working with Bing and Google, these are considered to be ors. So each one is optional. The plus sign helps a lot inside of Bing and Google to focus your searches. So if I only want to find documents about SharePoint security in Bing and Google, always type the plus signs, but not really required inside of SharePoint. Wildcards, I've already mentioned. The main reason that you'll probably want to know about wildcards is because too many users upload files with great big long file names with no spaces. Wildcards will let me start with the beginning of that file name and find based on the first couple characters. Notice that the wildcards are only supported at the end. You cannot put them at the beginning of a word. You can't put them in the middle of a word, only at the end of a word. You can put in multiple words, each with their own wildcards, but notice the wildcards at the end of each word. Here's some more about the Boolean logic. When you download this deck later on, you can read through this. It's basically normal Boolean logic. And for those of you who have worked with Boolean logic before, ands, ors, and nots, the assumptions made about processing those are not always what you are thinking when you type them. So always remember to add parentheses to group them, particularly if you're mixing ands and ors in the same question. Once you do a search, you get results back. And we typically will get a search results page that looks something like this. Down the middle is our content that we got back. When we mouse over one of these items, it will pop up a little hover panel and display some information about it. If you don't see the document, the PowerPoint slide, or a picture of the video, then you don't have Office Web Apps installed. Office Web Apps is an addition to the server farm to let you edit and display Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote files in the browser. So you might just get a description of the document instead of a picture of the document like I have here. So it depends on the way yours has been installed. Office 365, this will always work. On the left-hand side, you get a collection of refiners. So it's gone out and looked at the search results and said, I think you might be interested in restricting your search based on these things. So let me go back to my search site here and just do a search for the word SharePoint. And as I mouse over top of these things, that is a PowerPoint presentation. I see the first slide out there to the right. This is a website. I see a picture of the home page. If I go down through here further, I'll eventually find Word documents and things of that sort. Right now, there's a Word document. So when I mouse over top of it, sometimes it takes a few seconds, or yeah, it's a docx. That should pop up in a little bit and display the first page of that Word document, just like these PowerPoints. On the left-hand side is a list of refiners. These are the default refiners, which is the result type and the author and the date. Your search administrator can customize these refiners to use your own metadata, like part number, purchase order number, vendor, things that might be more useful to your organization. These are filters. If I click on these, it will then filter the results to match. So now I just see the Word documents. Over here is an author filter. So down through here, I see a bunch of authors. By the way, I have no idea who Kay is. I have no idea who this person is. These are pieces of data that were picked up out of the Word document itself. So it discovered in the properties of the Word document that there was an author. This might be the author. This might be the person who actually created the template 5 years ago. Hard to tell. So you will see things slip in like this where people go, who is this? I never heard of that person in our company. And it's because that person's name is in the properties of that particular document. So I've got 3 documents from that person. Could be that these were all created off the same Word template that was created by that person. And then down at the bottom, I've got a refiner to be able to go out and refine it based on the date. And again, your search administrator can change these, customize them so they're more useful to you. Search refiners, already mentioned those. Okay, so we're done with that slide. Search verticals. These used to be called scopes in the older versions of SharePoint. So when I go out here and I do a search, for that matter, let me go back to a home page somewhere. You see this little drop down? Those are called scopes in the older versions of SharePoint. They're called result sources now. And they are used to let our user help target their search. Just this site, everything, people, conversations. This is the default list. A search administrator can customize that list. Now it's displayed horizontally here instead of vertically, but this is the same list. Everything, people, conversations, videos, those are out of the box. I added a custom one called No Dupes because I'm going to show you a problem that helps solve. And I've even got a custom one out here that I've added called Product Flyers that lets me focus in on our sales literature. I don't have to search everything and get back tens of thousands of items. I can actually focus on just the product flyers themselves. So these things are called search verticals and are a great way to start filtering the search itself, limiting the search. Now when you search for people, interesting things happen. I have a user named Sam, and his network name or his login name is Sam C. I could type his full name out, Sam Conklin, that would work. If I do a search for Sam for everything, Oh, that's interesting. I thought I had Sam upload some documents. If I set him as author, I'll probably find him. Let's just try Sam. There, okay. Nope, those are keywords inside of a document. But I do see over here it found documents that were actually created by Sam. When I do an everything search for Sam, I'm finding metadata about SharePoint content. In other words, documents, pages, sites, items and announcements list, things of that sort. If I do a search in people, I'm searching in user profiles. So I found Sam, but notice I didn't find his documents. Now the pop-up over here helps me discover a little bit about his documents. It basically repeats the search just for Sam's documents. But be aware that when I search for a person, I may have to search twice. Search in people to find that person. Search in everything to find things that person has done. Okay, so everything versus people. Advanced search page, we've already talked about. So I highly encourage that you bring this up to the top somehow or other through a hyperlink or just training to let your users know that after they do a search and they can't find what they're looking for, to consider going out and using the advanced search page. Search alerts. We have alerts on lists and libraries and individual documents and individual announcements. You can also create a search alert. So I've gone out here to perform a search, and down here at the bottom there's a button called Alert Me, nicely hidden. I can actually go out and schedule a search and let search send me an email when it's discovered new content that matches what I'm searching for. So I could come out here every day, every morning, and do a search on my favorite keywords, or I could build a search alert and let it actually repeat this search for me and let me know about new things that it found, existing items that are changed or all changes, but not give me everything back that it finds, just what's changed since the last time it sent me an alert. That's a very nice feature. Very few users have found it. Property searches, I showed you one of these before with title, search for jets. Here's two properties. So I'm looking for any document that has the title of SharePoint and has a file type of DOC or docx. So that's very useful to go out and restrict my search. Down below is a list of samples of some of those file types. And I'll tell you a little secret right now. This file type up here only knows about Microsoft's favorite list of documents. So Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, text files, HTML, PDF, and that's pretty much it. If I'm searching for a picture, a JPEG, an image, an AutoCAD drawing, file type won't work. It will return nothing. There's a second one down here called secondary file extension, long nasty name, but if I put that up here instead of file type, then I can search for any file extension. So you might want to make a note of that one. That's a very useful one. When I train search administrators, one of the things that I ask them to do is to go in and modify file type so that it actually performs this operation instead of the default. That way our users don't have to learn about this long word or type it. This is Microsoft's list, and there's hundreds of these things out there. Most of them are not too useful for us. Some of them are kind of interesting. Is container. That's a way to find folders. I type in a keyword that has the word that's in the title of a folder. I don't want to find all the documents that have a keyword too, so I can add out there and is container. Containers are folders, libraries, sites. So is it something that contains other things? Or I don't want the containers in my results. I just want the actual files or items, is document. Now this is their list. Purchase order numbers, contracts, course IDs, those things aren't there. So with a search administrator, they can add to this list and let us be able to do more useful searches. So those property searches are the best way to target your content, but you've got to learn them. Dates are fun. SharePoint stores all of its dates in search in universal time. In other words, England. What time is it in London? A file uploaded in the USA at 10:50 p.m. at night won't be discovered by somebody who does a search looking for files on the 7th. Why? Because at 10:50 Eastern time, it was actually, 5 hours off, so 3:50 in the morning in England. So it was actually the 8th. So be aware that dates are stored internally in universal time. If you have users in different time zones and they told you I created the document at 4 p.m., don't assume that you're going to be able to find it based on a very targeted search that way. So EST, universal time is what's being used behind the scenes. Here's some other fun tricks that you might not have seen. I can go out and search on any of the date fields. I used right here, which is the last modified. It's a shortcut for last modified. So we could have typed modified. We could search by created, for example. We can specify a range of dates, keeping in mind the fact that it's GMT, by using ... So start date, end date. We can also go out and use a handful of reserved words, very nice little shortcuts. So I can go out and search on any date field with the keywords today, yesterday, this week, this month, this year, and last year. All of these are very nice little shortcuts as long as you're aware of this GMT issue. Because when I search for yesterday, it's searching for yesterday in universal time in London. Here's another property that you'll find that's very, very useful but is not very friendly. I want to find all of the announcements in SharePoint. I do not want to search for everything in SharePoint. I just want to find announcements. So if I do a little Googling out there to find content class, and I published an article in the MVP blogs at Microsoft on content class that has a list of all of them that I could discover. Microsoft has not documented them that well. But I can actually go out here and do a search on content class. By the way, it doesn't make any difference if these things are uppercase, lowercase. SharePoint search in general is case insensitive except for the Boolean words and, or, and not. So I'm going to go out here and do a search for STS, underline list, and then underline and the template name that I'm searching for. So in the case of the announcements list, it's kind of guessable and obvious. In the case of an assets library, you have to know a magic number, 851 or 861, I can't remember, it has to go here. And now I can go out and discover all of the announcements lists. Now I didn't find the announcements, I found all of the announcements list. So inside of my SharePoint, and inside of the things that I have permissions to see, I've only got one announcements list. Now notice that if I want to discover all of the announcements, then I simply add the word item in here. So instead of list, it's list item. I want to see all of the announcements that I have permissions to see anywhere in SharePoint. So list item. Hey, there's some free kittens out there. So this one is incredibly useful for very broad searches. I want to find all the asset libraries. I want to find all the discussion boards. I want to find all of the tasks that I have permissions to see. I can do that with this kind of a search. Okay, and by the way, if you do have any questions, you're welcome to post them. If they're quick questions, I will answer them now. Otherwise, I'll defer them to the end of the presentation. You can always send me questions at mike@maxtrain.com also. I'll be glad to follow up with those. All of the things that I'm showing you here are available in one of our Max classes. There's our plug. Content types. If you know the content type, you can search for that also. So I can search for any content type in any list. I've created a content type for purchase orders. By searching for content type purchase orders, I can find purchase orders in any library, anywhere inside of SharePoint. You can also search for MIME types if you happen to know what those are. MIME types are what are used inside of Internet Explorer, for example, to indicate what kind of document is being received so it knows how to open it. So if you know your MIME types, you can request those also. So content types or MIME types. Titles. Here's one of the strangest things inside of SharePoint Search, and this was Microsoft, I think, being a little too aggressive in trying to help us too much. I've got a file that I've uploaded here that's called Project 1723. Let me find it here. So I just typed that in my search box. Oops, and I put a space in there. And there's that file. It happens to be a Word document. That Word document has some properties associated with it. It has a name. That's how I found it here. I just happen to know its name. It has a title that I very carefully typed in because I want that name to be referred to as the title. I also gave it a project ID. I went out and did a search, and I found that particular document, but notice what ended up in my results here. I got back a file called Upgrade Exchange to Latest Version. Where in the world did that come from? It didn't display my title. Oops, I clicked. It didn't display my file name. It picked up something else as the title. It got that from the first line of that document. So it made a guess. And whenever we have something that makes assumptions, it's probably going to guess differently than the way I want. Now, this is the way it works out of the box. It actually looks inside of Word, Excel, PowerPoint. It looks for something on the first page that is large, bold-faced, and centered. Those are some of the guidelines. And if it finds those, it says, that's the title. Problem with that, of course, is that all of your expense reports have in big, bold, centered text, expense report. It doesn't have expense report for Mike, expense report for trip to Osaka. It just has expense report. So this guess about the title that's returned here quite often is not useful, particularly when I went out and did a search and all I got back was expense report, expense report, expense report, expense report, and I have to click on each one to see what they are. Your search administrator can override this and change the way this works. So be aware that when it comes to the word title and the word author, SharePoint's going to make some guesses. Okay, time-wise, I'm not going fast enough here, but I've ended this first section. What can you as an end user do to improve search results? Give your files meaningful names. Don't create these great big monstrous long names without spaces. Search cannot take that apart. The best I can do is sales asterisk to find that document. I cannot search for the word Jones. I cannot search for the word engineering. Put in spaces, dashes, or underlines, but don't just run them all together that way. If you have policies for metadata, follow them. And if you don't know if you have policies, ask. Find out if they've defined standard content types, site columns, and manage metadata to describe properties of documents. If you look for a document and you can't find it, let your search administrator, if you have one, know about it so that they can tweak search so you can better find things. And if you have a document that everybody's looking for, let the search administrator know because they can promote it. Now I've got just a couple minutes here to put in a sales pitch. You should have a search administrator. Very few organizations do. So I'm going to give you a list here very quickly of some of the cool things that a search administrator can do. They can create a thesaurus. Your employees cannot spell your CEO's name, so they can never find the documents from the CEO. So how do you solve that? You add a little collection of misspelled versions of those names, so no matter how they spell it, as long as they commonly misspell it, they'll still find the correct documents, the correct name. So in this example, if they search for IE, it will expand it to Internet Explorer and look for both of those terms for them. If you have 10,000 or 100,000 documents that you copied from your network shares, you can actually have SharePoint build a custom virtual property called a custom entity extraction based on any list of keywords. You're in the medical business, you can give SharePoint a list of all of the medical terminology, and then you can do a search on med term equals and find that. Or in my example here, I went out and searched for elements. So we have an individual element named hydrogen, and I can find all the documents about that. Missed files, duplicates. I got to show you this because this is one of the biggest oopses in all of SharePoint. I've got a purchase order out there, and I want to go find all of our purchase orders. So I'm just going to do a search for the word purchase order. Now I know that these things exist because right there is a library just clear full of them. But when I do a search for purchase order, I found one of them, but I find all kinds of other. There's a second purchase order. Good, I found two, but I didn't find the others. And if I click through them, I probably won't see them at all. Let me put quotes around this and focus this a little bit more. And now I can see that purchase order and I can see that purchase order, but these things are not purchase orders. SharePoint by default hides all of the duplicates. If I ask it for no dupes, I can go out here and find all of my purchase orders. Now, were these really duplicates? They're not. They're very close, but they're not duplicates. This thing I added here called new duplicates is custom. I put it there as a search administrator. It's not out of the box. So you're going to find that files like purchase orders that are very similar. In other words, they're identical except for purchase order number, a quantity, and a date. SharePoint's going to say, those are all duplicates. Let me show you one of them. That is something that a search administrator needs to change. Very important that you fix that. They can deal with missing file types. In other words, users can't find JPEGs. They cannot find image or picture files because they don't know that file type only shows them common file types. They have to know this word, secondary file extensions, or a search administrator can fix this. The wrong title, we've already talked about that one. I could add here wrong author. I do a search for author and I find documents that don't quite make sense. And it's because that person's name is in one of the Word properties, not in the SharePoint author properties. They can create focused search results here. So as an example, I want to go out and I want to be able to search for one of our products. And I'd like to find the product flyer for that. And I find all kinds of other things out here. And by the way, I happen to have discovered the flyer. But wouldn't it have been nice if we would have had a search administrator who added a custom scope for us so I can focus my search on just product flyers. There's the library. Here's the actual document I was looking for and no other clutter. So now I've got a very focused way to search, something else that a search administrator can do for you. As a site owner, you can do this in your own site, but then you got to do it in every site. It's better if you have a top-level search administrator that can do this for you. Query suggestions as you type, nice little drop-down list. We got them in Google and Bing. You can have them in SharePoint if a search administrator sets it up. Spelling suggestions. People can't type some of your terminology or your CEO's name or products, so you can have it offer spelling suggestions. And again, an administrator has to do that. Some pages are more important than the other. I want it to come to the top of the search results. Okay. Other items here you'll see in the slide deck itself. There's a lot of other cool things that an administrator can do for you to improve the quality of search. And that's it. We have two classes. One which is search for the power user, the site owner, the person who needs to use search every day to find things. And then we have a 3-day class for search administrators that goes into all the cool things that they can customize. And that's a wrap.
Well, thanks, Mike, for the information that you shared today. At this point, we're going to wait to see if there are some questions. Build some questions in the question bar there on your GoToWebinar screen. Type your questions in there, and we will have Mike answer those for you. While we're gathering questions, I'd like to share some promotions that we have here at Max right now. Just for attending today, you can receive 20% off the classes listed for attendees only, and these are specific classes that will be included in the slide deck related to SharePoint and SharePoint Search. Call us to reserve a seat. We realize that you may need some time for approval, but we'll get your seat reserved by Friday. End of business, 5 o'clock is when you can utilize this offer. Our biggie this year is our annual buy two get one free class promotion. Quite simply, you buy and attend 2 classes by December 31st and receive a 3rd class of equal or lesser value free. We'll send you some of those details in the slide deck as well. Let's take a quick look here and see if we have some questions for you, Mike. Looks like we do. Looks like Adam has a question for you, Mike. I've sent that over.
Okay, and the question is it possible to search Visio files that they're able to be displayed via Visio services? Visio files are supported, but they're not in that default list of file extensions in the on-premises SharePoint. In 365, I think it's already there. But on-premises, your search administrator would have to add the file extension so that the contents will be extracted. After doing so, they'll have to re-index that content.
Great. Wonderful. So here are some of the class lists. This will be included in your slide deck. We'll get that out to you tomorrow. Do we have any other questions out there? Well, just a reminder, we'll get the slide deck out to you. If you want to take advantage right away and save your seat in one of our classes, just give us a call at 513-322-8888 and mention that you were on today's webinar and that you want to reserve a seat, and we will take care of that for you. Thank you for joining our session today. I hope you found the information valuable and useful. Thank you, Mike, for a great webinar. As a reminder, look out for that slide deck and special offer tomorrow. If you have any follow-up questions or want to learn more about Max offerings, please feel free to give us a call. Thanks again for your time, and we hope to see you soon.